Help give kids an extra life by donating today to help sick and injured children. Link in the description and pinned comment below.
You know, it's times like this that I wish those cool drinks from the Monster Hunter games were actually real.
Well, let's talk about Capcom again. So Street Fighter V has been chugging along, steadily getting better in terms of content over the past several years, to the point where it's gone from one of the franchise's most lackluster titles to one of its biggest. But with the new generation in full swing, the next step in the franchise was not a matter of if, but when. So it didn't surprise me when the Capcom Pro Tour's latest season ended with tournament standard time. Nor did the first reveal of Street Fighter VI and its NFT Twitter profile pic logo. I swear to God, if Capcom actually releases official NFTs for this game,
I will feast on their souls!
Anyway, what did surprise me was Capcom dropping a whole-ass collection of their fighting game history, including the second to last Street Fighter II, all 5 Darkstalkers arcade games, the game where Akuma is a hidden mech, and both chibi games. And tucked away in the corner there was the last game I expected to see, an obscure title called Red Earth. And by tucked away in the corner, I mean right front and center on the box art. I'm guessing that most people's reactions to seeing this title were either, holy shit, or, eh? Remember, before Capcom put most of their eggs in the Street Fighter basket, they made a lot of fighting games, nearly all of which would eventually make it to home consoles in some form. Red Earth is one of the very few exceptions, and was something of an oddball among Capcom fighting games. So just what was it about Red Earth that made it so unique?
You might want to grab a D20 for this one. We're diving into some high fantasy crap.
Now, being the rare game that it is, or, well, was, there's not that much info on this game's development, unlike several other games I've covered. However, one thing I can cover is the hardware this game used. I've already covered Capcom games that use the CPS-1 arcade board, and its successor, the prolific CPS-2. Red Earth, however, was the first game to utilize Capcom's CPS-3 hardware, which was Capcom's final proprietary hardware before switching to the Dreamcast-based Naomi hardware. And pardon the obvious joke here, but it's a complicated beast. For security reasons, each game had 2 components to it, a CD which contained the encrypted game files, and a security cartridge which contained the game's BIOS and the decryption logic, with the keys stored in a battery-backed SRAM. Capcom chose to use a CD format to keep costs lower. When the system was started up, the CD files were loaded onto the motherboard memory for execution. Then at runtime, the game would be decrypted by the security cartridge. Now these cartridges did not take tampering lightly. Any attempt to do so would render the game as useless as a Wii Points card nowadays by erasing the decryption keys. And that's not the only parallel I can make to obsolescence here. Remember how the older Pokemon games would lose their ability to save when the cartridge battery expired? The CPS-3 was the same way, but worse. The battery in the security cartridge would render the game DOA if it ran down, with the single exception of Street Fighter II Second Impact, which used a set of default keys once the cartridge went kaput. Like I said, it was a complicated beast, and rarely used. Lasted less than 3 years, with a total of only 6 games to its use. The other 5 being the Street Fighter III series and both Capcom JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fighting games. Emulation wasn't even made possible until 2007. As for Red Earth, it was released in 1996, originally in Japan under the name of Warzard, and later overseas where it was much less common. So let's pop a quarter in the slot and start this baby up! Well, as soon as this game frickin' loads, that is. So the story takes place in a parallel world where there was basically no industrial revolution to fuck up the planet. The time frame depends on your region, the 14th century in the North American version and 1999 in the Japanese version. Either way, some evil dude has unleashed monsters upon the world, and now 4 warriors, each with their own reasons, rise up and fight. First is Leo, a king that was cursed with the body of a beast and driven from his kingdom and now seeks to avenge his countrymen. Then there's Kenji, a ninja who has been assigned to track down the invaders who attacked his country, though he's also suspicious of his shogun. Number 3 is Mai Ling, a young martial artist who's come back from a tournament only to find her village in flames. Finally is the crowd favorite Tessa, a witch, sorcerologist, who's investigating the unusual storms around the globe. Remember, fantasy world plus no industry equals no climate change inducing greenhouse gases. After you pick one of these 4 characters, you're prompted to input a password and... wait. 4? Only 4? That's right, the first unusual thing about this game is the incredibly small playable roster. This is the first sign that ultimately shows the main difference between Red Earth and most fighting games. It's primarily single-player focused. The main draw of fighting games is the focus on one-on-one multiplayer, but the single-player mode is garnish. In Red Earth, the single-player mode is the main course. The main story is a monster-based boss rush. The order in which you fight these bosses depends on your character, but you will fight them all eventually. The objective is simple. Knock down the boss's considerable health bar and you win, gain experience points and regain health, and move on to the next one. Kind of like a fighting game / RPG precursor to Monster Hunter. That's another unique thing about this game, the RPG elements. As you gain experience, your characters will level up, gaining new skills, titles, and abilities as they do. You can save these levels using a password when you complete a run or get a game over.
That's the prompt I mentioned earlier, just so you know.
According to producer Takashi Sato, this progression idea was implemented as a response to the widening skill gap between casuals and competitive players. The best players were getting better, and Sato figured that a game with character level progression was a way to compensate. Of course, it all means jack if you don't understand how to play. So the system with which we use said skills should look familiar on the surface, as Red Earth uses the classic Street Fighter 6-button format, along with dashes, high jumping, recovery rolling, as well as the universal OTG. There are also a couple of unique mechanics that will help you greatly in destroying the Monster Brigade. The first is the Ultimate Guard. You can assume a defensive stance by pressing a punch and kick at the same strength. If an opponent hits you during this time, you take no damage whatsoever for the next few seconds. This could be considered a precursor to the parry system which created some of Street Fighter III's most hype moments. However, there are some caveats which help prevent abuse of it. There's some significant recovery time if you're unsuccessful, which leaves you open to severe punishment. And once you're in that stance, you're committed for the next few seconds, unless you use an ultimate counter during the block stun, assuming you have it. But used wisely, it can save your hide. Second is how super moves are handled. Instead of a super gauge, you have elemental orbs. You start each credit or match with 2 of these, and gain more at random by damaging the boss up to a maximum of 3. There are 6 types, those being fire, wind, lightning, ice, meteor, and poison, and they can be used for 2 types of super moves. There are character-specific Mystic Arts, no, this isn't the Tales of series, and elemental Mystic Force moves, no, this isn't Disney-era Power Rangers. An interesting system, but it's one that only really works in a game like this. For fighting games that include super moves to really be played on a competitive level, you need a consistent means of using those moves that doesn't rely on RNG. And even though there is a versus mode in Red Earth, more on that later, the main focus is still those boss fights. Speaking of which, let's talk about these boss fights. There are 8 of them in all, and again, the order of the first 6 depends on which character you choose. Since Leo is considered the main protagonist, I'll run down the monsters in the order of encounters during his route. In Savalia, the monster is Hauser, who looks like a cross between a dragon and a freaking T-Rex. Wow, good start there. Aside from its powerful physical blows, Hauser also has a few powerful flame attacks, including gigantic flame breath and flame pillars. Jurassic Park was never like this. Now, a boss's health will depend on your carried over level in order to keep things interesting. The monsters also have different battle properties. Hauser, for example, has super armor for some moves, but can't block. Also, this game has fatalities depending on how you finish off your opponent. Next on Leo's itinerary is Zepang, where you fight a giant Oni named Kongo. Like Hauser, Kongo can't block you, but has heavy attack power to compensate. He relies mainly on his massive strength and has moves that can stun you and absorb your projectiles. Up next, we're off to Sanjipt, which is always stage 3 no matter which character you've chosen. Here, a wicked priestess awakens a sphinx-like chimera named Ravenge. Being a chimera, this beast has a wide assortment of attacks of both physical and magical nature, and can inflict multiple status ailments including petrification and poison.
But then again, what else would you expect from the most evil of all evils which has followed us through all dimensions, lands, and eras? Ancient Egypt!
After the 3rd stage, you'll face a bonus level, where you destroy a giant statue piece by piece to gain more experience. Because nothing says training to defeat world-threatening monsters like vandalizing ancient architecture. Now, between levels, you'll get brief cutscenes that further show each character's story and their determination to purge the land of evil. Always nice to see those. So now comes Stage 4, which takes us to Icelarn to fight against Hydron, a trident-wielding kraken. And no, it did not come to play hockey, it came to skewer us. It has moves that can freeze you, a poison cloud that can stun you, a flame attack of all things, a strong defense powered by his trident, and...
I don't even watch hentai and I still know where this is going.
Following that, we set off for Gora, where the opponent who lies in wait is the Harpy Lady. I'm sorry, this one's name is Lavia. Being a Harpy, she has the power of flight and wields it to great effect in dealing with intruders. She can create dust storms, attack you with both her wings and her feathers, and has powerful grappling moves as well. Leo, being a slow melee character, will generally have a harder time with her than the others. After that, we are directed to a crypt, and just like Ravenge, this is Stage 6 for everyone. This time we face Gigi, a giant statue who's looking at you like, "Hello and welcome to Will It Blend?" Most of its attacks make use of those 4 ginormous scimitars, though it can also summon spears to stab you and stone pillars to crush you. It can also change its color and stance, but that just changes which kinds of projectiles it can block. Once you take it offline, hey, another bonus stage! Now you have to break a bunch of stone faces while trying to avoid spears from the ground that waste your time. And thus we approach the endgame. As a mysterious castle appears in the sky, which bears the name of Darmanor, you are opposed by Blade, a dangerous suit of walking armor powered by an emerald with an imprisoned soul in it. A soul that happened to belong to Leo's head bodyguard. Also, that sword looks extremely bulky and impractical and designed to mutilate absolutely anyone. He relies mainly on a Dreyer for the first part of the fight, and it hits hard. Hopefully you've gotten the hang of the ultimate guard by now. It gets even worse once he takes off his cape. That's because he gains new attacks like an elemental dragon, a soul-imprisoning mirror, and firing pieces of his armor like missiles. Eventually, he will fall and reveal the name of the true mastermind, Scion, a wizard with a god complex. What high fantasy story would be complete without one? So he wants to destroy humanity and replace them with a new race.
Kinda sounds similar to Grandmaster Mayo. Question is, where's Strider when you need him? Am I right or am I right, huh?
The dude is accompanied by 2 dragons who attack with elemental breath and will swoop in to mangle you, while Scion himself attacks with magic blasts, summoning swords, and the classic D&D spell of Sticks to Snakes. Eventually you'll wear him down, but...
Say the line,
Scion.
This isn't even my final form. Scion mutates into this, I don't even know what to call it, for the real final battle. He has all the attacks from his first form, only stronger, along with some nasty new moves, and a transfiguration spell that transforms you into a harmless critter until it wears off. You've got your work cut out for you. And once you finally defeat him, he gives one last cliche, "As long as there is evil in the hearts of men" speech before fading away. Now the ending you'll get for your character will depend on either how well you do or what choices you make. You don't see that often in fighting games, which is a nice touch. So as a rare single-player focused fighting game, Red Earth really does its job well for the most part. First of all, in terms of presentation, it's excellent both on its own as well as showing what the CPS3 hardware is capable of. As far as graphics go, this hits the mark. Sprites, backgrounds, cutscenes, they're all downright amazing. Just what we had come to expect from Capcom of that era, and then some. Especially notable is the adaptive zooming when characters get closer together or farther apart. The sound direction is also top-notch. The themes are great to listen to, the Japanese VAs are on point, and every sound effect magnifies the impact of each attack. Most importantly, however, the gameplay works just as well as any 2D fighting game from Capcom at the time. Moves are smooth and work just as you'd expect, and some of the mechanics were adapted from other games to make a cohesive whole. Mainly dashing and pursuit attacks coming from Darkstalkers, and super jumps and super armor from Marvel games. While it does play a little slower than most of said other games, and is less focused on combos, Red Earth's mechanics still make for a satisfying experience. Though I will say that the RPG elements can be a little bit of a mixed bag. Don't get me wrong, I like the idea of having your character gain new moves by getting stronger, and the password save was the best way to handle this in arcades, but I'm not entirely sure if Capcom was completely committed to the idea. I say this because of the Versus mode. Yes, despite the main focus on single player, there is a Versus mode, and it plays like a standard fighter. but the use of RNGs to power up your super moves means there's little viability as a competitive fighter. What's more, to max out your characters, you need versus points from this mode. The winner in a versus match gains versus points depending on the difference in level between the two fighters. And some of your character's level up bonuses are tied to these versus points.
So to summarize, the game itself is single player focused, and as you level up through potentially multiple playthroughs, you gain new moves and abilities for your characters. But in order to unlock all the moves, you have to play the versus mode.
That is bullshit blazing, still my heart is blazing. If the word kill me, I don't need a new word on there.
With all that said, I still think that Red Earth is a solid game, and it's great to see that it's finally getting a home release after all these years as part of the Capcom Fighting Collection. Which begs the question, why the hell did it take so long? Well, it can't be the complexity of the CPS3 hardware. After all, the other CPS3 games got home releases. The first JoJo game got ported to PlayStation, and its follow-up got a release on Dreamcast. As for Street Fighter 3, all three of them got Dreamcast ports, with the first two being bundled as Double Impact. In the end, there's really no reasonable answer other than money, and that's likely due to the sparse release outside of Japan. If even established brands like Street Fighter weren't selling super fast at that point, what chance did an outsider like Red Earth have? However, as rare as it was, it did leave a legacy. Characters from the game like Tessa, Leo, Kenji, Hauser, and Hydron would appear in games like Pocket Fighter and Capcom Fighting Evolution. More recently, Red Earth was one of the games that got representation in Capcom's mobile card game Teppen, and not just a scrap either. And in fact, Red Earth is the very reason for the Capcom Fighting Collection even getting made. According to producer Shuhei Matsumoto, a couple of longtime programmers came to him and told him they wanted to bring Red Earth to modern consoles. The other games were just picked to fill out the collection, which is why Leo is displayed as the star of the show. While a lot of people buying the collection will likely be getting it for Darkstalkers or Puzzle Fighter, I'll be getting it because Capcom decided to take a chance on a game that wasn't afraid to take chances.
And while a few of these games were recently announced to be part of the upcoming Capcom Arcade Second Stadium, I still think there's enough unique games between the two to justify both. I mean, we're not getting Red Earth on the Arcade Stadium, but then again, that collection is getting both Mega Man arcade games. And I've already talked about how good those are. I'm the Quarter Guy, and until next time, the arcade is closed.
Hey everyone, QG here. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share the video around. Feel free to check out my Twitter and my Twitch streams, and consider supporting me through Patreon and donating to my Extra Life campaign to support Children's Wisconsin. Thanks for watching.